Kate Williams never imagined that a regular Tuesday morning would change her life forever. She was rushing through the crowded streets of London, clutching her worn leather bag and checking her phone for the third time in 5 minutes. Her job at the small charity office didn't pay much, but she loved helping families in need. Today was different, though. She was already 20, minutes late for an important meeting with potential donors. The autumn air was crisp, and fallen leaves crunched under her feet as she hurried past the busy shops and cafes. Kate had always been the type of person who noticed everything around her: the elderly man feeding pigeons, the young mother pushing her stroller, the street musician playing violin near the subway entrance. But today, her mind was focused on one thing: getting to work before her boss noticed her absence. As she turned the corner onto Victoria Street, Kate noticed something unusual. There were more people than normal, and they seemed to be gathering along the sidewalks. Some held small British flags, others had cameras ready. A few police officers were directing traffic, and barriers had been set up along parts of the road. Her heart sank as she realized what this meant. A royal visit was happening, and her usual route to work was completely blocked. Kate checked her phone again and saw 3 missed calls from her colleague Sarah. She knew she had to find another way around. But the crowd was growing thicker by the minute. Children sat on their father's shoulders. Elderly couples shared folding chairs they had brought from home, and tourists snapped photos of everything in sight. The excitement in the air was almost tangible. But Kate felt only frustration building inside her chest. She tried to push through the crowd politely, saying, "Excuse me," and "Pardon me," as she squeezed between people. Some smiled and moved aside. Others were too caught up in the anticipation to notice her. A security guard near one of the barriers shook his head when she pointed toward the building where she worked. The entire area had been sealed off, and there was no getting through until after the royal motorcade passed. Kate found herself trapped between a group of excited school children and a news crew setting up their equipment. The reporter was practicing her lines, talking about the surprise visit from members of the royal family to open a new community center. Kate's charity had actually helped fund some of the programs at that center, but she had been too busy with paperwork to pay attention to when the official opening would happen. The crowd around her continued to grow, and Kate realized she had no choice but to wait it out. She pulled out her phone to text her boss, explaining the situation. As she typed, she could hear people around her sharing stories about previous royal encounters, debating which members of the family might appear, and speculating about what they would wear. An elderly woman next to her had been waiting since dawn and had brought sandwiches to share with anyone who was hungry, despite her initial annoyance at being delayed. Kate found herself getting caught up in the atmosphere. There was something magical about seeing people from all walks of life coming together, united by curiosity and excitement. The school children were practicing their waves, hoping to catch the attention of any royal who might pass by. Their teacher was trying to keep them organized, while also craning her neck to see if any official cars were approaching. As the minutes ticked by, Kate began to notice the small details that made this gathering special. An immigrant family was explaining British royal traditions to their young son in broken English, their faces beaming with pride at being part of this moment. A group of teenagers who had probably never shown interest in the monarchy were taking selfies and posting them on social media with excited captions. Even the police officers seemed more relaxed than usual, chatting with the crowd and posing for photos when asked. Kate realized that her morning delay might actually be a blessing in disguise. When was the last time she had been part of something bigger than herself? When had she last taken time to notice the community around her instead of rushing from one task to another? As she put her phone away and decided to embrace the unexpected adventure, she had no idea that the next few minutes would give her a story she would tell for the rest of her life. The first sign that something was about to happen came from the excited whispers rippling through the crowd. Kate looked up from checking her messages to see people pointing down the street, cameras being raised and children being lifted onto shoulders. In the distance, she could make out the familiar sight of black cars with tinted windows approaching slowly, flanked by motorcycle police, with their lights flashing. Kate felt her heart rate increase as the motorcade drew closer. She had seen royal visits on television countless times, but being here in person felt completely different. The energy of the crowd was infectious. Strangers were smiling at each other, sharing the anticipation of witnessing something special. The elderly woman next to her grabbed Kate's arm gently and whispered, "I've been waiting 70 years to see this close up," as the cars came nearer. Kate could see the faces of the security personnel scanning the crowd, their trained eyes looking for any signs of trouble. But all they would find today were excited faces, waving flags, and the innocent joy of people who had taken time out of their busy lives to witness a moment of history. The lead car passed by slowly, followed by another, and then came the main vehicle that everyone was waiting for. Kate found herself holding her breath as the royal car approached her section of the crowd. Through the clear windows, she could see figures inside, though the details were still unclear from her position. The car was moving at walking pace, allowing the occupants to wave and acknowledge the gathering of well-wishers. Children around Kate were jumping up and down, their small hands waving frantically in hopes of catching a royal eye. Then something unexpected happened. The car began to slow down even more, and Kate could see movement inside as someone appeared to be gesturing to the driver. The crowd around her pressed forward slightly, sensing that something special was about to occur. Kate found herself pushed closer to the barrier, close enough to see her own reflection in the car's polished surface. The vehicle came to a complete stop directly in front of where Kate was standing. She could feel the excitement of the people around her reaching a crescendo. With camera phones being thrust into the air and voices calling out greetings, the elderly woman beside her was practically vibrating with excitement. Her wrinkled hands clasped together as if in prayer. Through the window, Kate could now clearly see the occupants of the car. Her eyes widened as she recognized the familiar faces she had seen countless times in newspapers and on television, but never imagined she would encounter in person. The figure closest to her window was looking directly out at the crowd, and Kate felt a strange sensation as their eyes seemed to meet for just a moment. What happened next would replay in Kate's mind for years to come. The car door began to open, and a collective gasp went up from the surrounding crowd. This wasn't part of the planned schedule. Royal visits typically involve stepping out only at the designated location, not random stops along the route. But here, right in front of Kate and the gathered crowd, history was being made in an unscripted moment. A security officer quickly moved to position himself near the opening door, his alert eyes scanning the crowd once more. The excitement was almost overwhelming. People were calling out respectful greetings. Children were trying to get better views, and the press photographers were rapidly adjusting their positions to capture. Whatever was about to unfold, Kate felt frozen in place, her usual confidence replaced by a mixture of awe and disbelief. She was standing less than 10 feet away from members of the royal family who had decided, for reasons known only to them, to make an impromptu stop and interact with the crowd. The morning that had started with frustration over being late for work had transformed into something extraordinary. As the car door opened wider, Kate could see the careful movements of someone preparing to step out onto the pavement. The crowd around her had fallen into an expectant hush, broken only by the clicking of cameras and the distant sound of traffic being redirected by police. Kate realized she was witnessing something that couldn't be planned or scheduled, a spontaneous moment of connection between royalty and the people who had gathered to see them. The elderly woman next to Kate whispered, a quiet "oh my goodness," as they both watched the scene unfold before their eyes. Kate's hands were trembling slightly as she gripped the barrier, not from nervousness but from the sheer magnitude of finding herself at the center of such an unexpected and historic moment. She knew that whatever was about to happen would be something she would remember and treasure for the rest of her life. As the royal figure stepped out of the car, Kate felt the world around her slow to an almost dreamlike pace. The person who emerged was elegant and composed, dressed in a beautiful navy coat that complemented the autumn morning perfectly. Kate recognized the face immediately, someone she had only seen in photographs and on television. Screens was now standing just a few feet away from her, real and human and surprisingly approachable. The security team quickly formed a protective circle, but their body language suggested this stop had been planned in the moment rather than being part of the official schedule. The royal figure looked around at the gathered crowd with genuine warmth, acknowledging the excited faces and raised hands with gracious waves and nods. Kate noticed how naturally they moved among the people, as if this kind of interaction was second nature. Children in the crowd began calling out shy greetings, their voices mixing with the respectful applause of the adults. Kate watched as the royal visitor made a deliberate effort to acknowledge different sections of the crowd, turning to wave at the school group, nodding to the elderly couples, and sharing gentle smiles with the families who had brought their youngest children to witness this moment. Then, something magical happened that Kate would replay in her mind thousands of times in the years to come. The royal figure began walking along the barrier, stopping to speak with different people in the crowd. Kate watched in amazement as they bent down to hear what a small child was trying to say, laughed at something whispered by a teenager, and placed a gentle hand on the shoulder of an elderly man who had tears in his eyes. Kate found herself directly in the path of this impromptu walkabout. Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure everyone around her could hear it. She watched as the royal visitor approached her section of the barrier, stopping to accept flowers from a young mother and taking time to admire a drawing that a child had obviously prepared, hoping for exactly this kind of opportunity. When the moment came that the royal figure stood directly in front of Kate, she felt her mind go completely blank. All the things she had ever thought she might say if given such an opportunity disappeared, replaced by a sense of overwhelming gratitude for finding herself in this incredible situation. The royal visitor looked at Kate with kind eyes and spoke in a voice that was warm and genuine. "Thank you for waiting out here this morning," they said, their tone making Kate feel as if she were the only person in the crowd. "I hope we haven't made you too late for wherever you were." Heading. The comment was so unexpectedly thoughtful and human that Kate felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes. Here was someone who could have simply waved from the car window, but instead had chosen to step out and acknowledge the individual people who had gathered to see them. Kate managed to find her voice, though it came out softer than she intended. "It's such an honor," she said, her words sincere and heartfelt. "I work for a charity that helps local families, and seeing you take time for people like this means everything." She wasn't sure why she had shared that detail, but something about the genuine interest in the royal visitor's expression had made her feel comfortable enough to speak from her heart. The response she received surprised her even more. "That's wonderful work you're doing," came the reply, with what seemed like genuine admiration. "The community programs here are so important. Thank you for the difference you're making." Kate felt a warm glow spread through her chest at these words. To have her work acknowledged and appreciated by someone she had always admired from afar felt almost surreal. As their brief conversation continued, Kate became aware of the cameras capturing the moment, the excited whispers of the people around her, and the careful attention of the security team. But in that instant, it felt like a private conversation between two people who genuinely cared about making the world a better place. The royal visitor asked Kate about her charity work, listening attentively to her answers and asking thoughtful follow-up questions that showed they were truly interested in what she had to say. Kate realized she was experiencing something that went far beyond meeting a famous person. This was a moment of human connection that transcended titles and positions. The person standing in front of her was showing genuine curiosity about her life and work, treating her not as a member of a crowd, but as an individual worthy of attention and respect. As their conversation drew to a natural close, Kate felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over her. She had started the morning frustrated about being late for work, but now she understood that she had been exactly where she was meant to be, at exactly the right time. Sometimes the universe has a way of putting us in the path of experiences that will stay with us forever, and Kate knew this was one of those moments. As the conversation continued, Kate noticed something extraordinary happening around them. The entire crowd had fallen into a respectful quiet, as if everyone understood they were witnessing something special. Even the excited children had stopped their chatter, watching with wide eyes as their royal visitor took genuine interest in talking with the people who had gathered to see them. The moment felt sacred in a way that Kate had never experienced before. The royal figure seemed completely comfortable in this unplanned interaction, moving with natural grace and showing no signs of being in a hurry to return to their official schedule. Kate watched as they continued along the barrier, spending time with each person who had something to share. A veteran proudly showed his military medals and received a heartfelt thank you for his service. A young artist nervously presented a sketch she had drawn, her face lighting up when it was admired and carefully examined. Kate found herself observing not just the royal visitor, but the profound effect this spontaneous walkabout was having on everyone present. She could see elderly people wiping away tears of joy, parents lifting their children for better views, and teenagers who had been taking selfies moments before, now standing in respectful silence. There was something about witnessing genuine kindness and interest from someone in such a prominent position that seemed to touch everyone's hearts. What struck Kate most deeply was how the royal visitor remembered details from each brief conversation and referred back to them when speaking with others nearby. When talking to the elderly woman who had been waiting since dawn, they mentioned the charity work Kate had described, creating connections between the people they were meeting. This wasn't just a series of individual interactions, but a genuine effort to understand and celebrate the community that had gathered. As the walkabout continued, Kate overheard conversations that revealed the depth of preparation and knowledge that had gone into this visit. Even though this particular stop with the crowd hadn't been planned, the royal visitor knew about local issues, recent community achievements, and ongoing challenges facing the area. They spoke knowledgeably about programs Kate's charity was involved with, demonstrating an impressive understanding of the work being done at the grassroots level. Kate watched in amazement as a shy young boy with autism was approached with infinite patience and gentleness. The royal visitor knelt down to the child's level, speaking softly and waiting for responses, without any pressure or rushing. When the boy finally managed to whisper, "Thank you for visiting," the joy on the royal face was unmistakable and completely genuine. Kate realized she was witnessing someone who truly understood the responsibility and privilege of their position. The impromptu meet and greet lasted much longer than anyone had expected, and Kate could see members of the official party checking their watches and having quiet conversations with security personnel. But the royal visitors seemed unwilling to cut short these meaningful interactions, treating each person they met as if they were the most important person in the world at that moment. Kate felt privileged to witness such authentic leadership in action. As the walkabout drew toward its conclusion, Kate noticed photographers capturing not just the royal visitor, but the faces of the people in the crowd. She saw her own reflection in a nearby camera lens and realized that she would forever be part of the visual record of this extraordinary morning. Her face, along with those of her fellow community members, would be preserved as part of a moment that demonstrated the power of genuine human connection. The royal visitor eventually began making their way back toward the car, but not before taking time to thank the security team, the local police, and even the street maintenance workers who had helped prepare the area. Kate was struck by this attention to everyone who had contributed to making the visit possible, regardless of their role or position. It was a masterclass in grace and gratitude that she knew she would never forget as they prepared to depart. The royal visitor turned back to the crowd one final time, raising their hand in a gesture of farewell that somehow managed to feel personal to each individual who had been part of the experience. Kate felt as if that final wave was directed specifically at her, a goodbye between friends rather than a formal royal acknowledgement of subjects. The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause as the car door closed. But it wasn't the polite, expected clapping of a formal event. This was heartfelt appreciation from people who had been given an unexpected gift of time, attention, and genuine human kindness. Kate found herself clapping with tears in her eyes, overwhelmed by gratitude for having been part of something so meaningful and authentic. As the royal motorcade slowly pulled away from the curb, Kate felt a profound sense of emptiness, as if she were waking up from the most beautiful dream. The crowd around her began to disperse gradually, but nobody seemed to be in a hurry to leave. People lingered, sharing their experiences with strangers who had become temporary friends through witnessing this extraordinary moment. Together, Kate found herself in conversation with the elderly woman who had been standing beside her throughout the entire encounter. Mrs. Henderson, as she introduced herself, had tears streaming down her wrinkled cheeks. "In all my years," she said, her voice shaking with emotion, "I have never seen anything like that. The way they spoke to each of us, as if we mattered, as if our lives were important to them. That's true royalty right there." Around them, Kate could hear similar conversations taking place. Parents were explaining to their children what they had just witnessed. Teenagers were sharing videos on their phones. And elderly couples were holding hands and smiling with joy. The young boy with autism was telling his mother over and over again about the nice person who had knelt down to talk with him. His face glowing with happiness that would clearly last for days. Kate pulled out her phone to check the time and realized that nearly 2 hours had passed since she had first gotten caught up in the crowd. Her missed meeting at work seemed insignificant now compared to what she had experienced. She had several text messages from colleagues asking where she was, but she found it difficult to focus on anything other than processing the incredible morning she had just lived through. As she finally began to walk toward her office, Kate noticed that her perception of the familiar streets had somehow changed. The same buildings and shops she passed every day seemed different now, as if they had been touched by the magic of what had occurred. She found herself walking more slowly, taking in details she usually rushed past. Still carrying the sense of wonder that the royal visit had awakened in her, when Kate finally arrived at her office, she was greeted by a crowd of curious colleagues who had been following news reports of the royal visit on social media. Sarah, her closest friend at work, immediately noticed the unusual glow in Kate's expression. "You were there, weren't you?" she asked excitedly. "I saw the news coverage and wondered if you got caught up in it when you were trying to get to work." Kate tried to explain what had happened, but she found it difficult to put the experience into words that could convey its true impact. How could she describe the feeling of being genuinely seen and heard by someone she had always admired from afar? How could she capture the magic of witnessing authentic kindness and interest from someone in such a prominent position? Her colleagues listened with fascination, but Kate knew that unless they had been there themselves, they couldn't fully understand the transformation she had undergone throughout the rest of the day. Kate found it challenging to concentrate on her regular tasks. Her mind kept returning to the conversations she had witnessed, the genuine smiles she had seen, and the profound sense of connection she had felt with both the royal visitor and her fellow community members. She realized that something fundamental had shifted in her perspective on life, leadership, and the importance of treating every person with dignity and respect during her lunch break. Kate discovered that photos and videos from the impromptu walkabout were already appearing online. She found several images that clearly showed her in the crowd, including one beautiful shot of her conversation with the royal visitor. Seeing herself in that moment captured forever gave her goosebumps. She looked genuinely happy and engaged in a way that surprised even her. Kate decided to share one of the photos on her personal social media account, writing a heartfelt post about the experience. She described how a morning that had started with frustration had become one of the most meaningful days of her life. She wrote about witnessing genuine leadership in action, about the power of taking time to connect with people as individuals, and about how the experience had reminded her why her work with families in need was so important. The response to her post was overwhelming. Friends and family members she hadn't heard from in months were commenting and sharing their own thoughts about what royal visits meant to them. Colleagues from her charity work were inspired by her description of how the royal visitor had acknowledged the importance of community programs. Even strangers were responding with their own stories of meaningful encounters with public figures who had taken time to treat them as individuals, rather than just faces in a crowd. As the day progressed, Kate began to realize that the morning's experience was continuing to ripple outward, touching more and more people through the stories and images being shared. What had started as a spontaneous decision by the royal visitor to stop and connect with a crowd was becoming a source of inspiration for countless others who heard about it secondhand. Kate felt honored to have been part of something that was bringing joy and hope to so many people. In the weeks that followed her extraordinary encounter, Kate discovered that the experience had created lasting changes in both her personal and professional life. The memory of that morning continued to inspire her daily, reminding her of the importance of treating every person she met with the same genuine interest and respect she had witnessed from the royal visitor. She found herself taking more time to listen to the families her charity served, asking deeper questions about their needs and dreams rather than just processing their paperwork. Kate's colleagues began to notice the change in her approach to work. She was more patient during difficult conversations, more creative in finding solutions to complex problems, and more enthusiastic about organizing community events. Her supervisor, Mrs. Patterson, called her into the office one afternoon to comment on the positive energy she had been bringing to the team. "Whatever happened to you that day you were late," she said with a knowing smile. "It seems to have reminded you of why we do this. Work." The photo of Kate's conversation with the royal visitor had been picked up by several news outlets and was being used to illustrate stories about the power of community engagement. Kate received messages from people all over the country who had seen the image and been moved by the genuine connection it captured. A teacher from Scotland wrote to tell her that she had shown the photo to her students as an example of how leaders should interact with the people they serve. A grandfather from Wales sent a handwritten letter saying the image had restored his faith in public service. 3 months after the royal visit, Kate received an unexpected invitation in the mail. The palace was hosting a reception for community volunteers, and her name had been included on the guest list. The invitation explained that the event was being organized to recognize people who were making a difference in their local communities. And Kate's work with her charity had been brought to their attention during research. Following the impromptu street meeting, Kate stared at the elegant invitation for several minutes, hardly believing what she was reading. She would have the opportunity to attend a formal royal event, to see again the person who had taken time to speak with her on that memorable morning. But more importantly, her work helping families in need was being acknowledged and celebrated at the highest levels. The reception was held in a beautiful historic building, with Kate wearing the best dress she owned and feeling simultaneously nervous and excited. As she entered the grand hall, she was amazed to see hundreds of other community volunteers who had been invited to celebrate their contributions to society. There were teachers and social workers, volunteer firefighters, and youth group leaders, people from all walks of life who had dedicated themselves to helping others. When the royal family members entered the reception, Kate felt the same sense of awe she had experienced on the street that morning months earlier, but this time she was prepared for the grace and warmth they would show to everyone present. She watched as they moved through the crowd, spending time with each group of guests, asking thoughtful questions about their work and expressing genuine appreciation for their efforts. When Kate's turn came to be presented, she was amazed that the royal visitor remembered their street conversation in detail. They asked about her charity work, inquired about specific programs they had discussed, and wanted to know how the community center opening had gone. Kate realized that their interest had been completely authentic, not just polite conversation to fill time during an unexpected wall cord. During their brief conversation at the reception, Kate learned that the impromptu stop on her street had been inspired by seeing the diverse crowd that had gathered. The royal visitor explained that formal events, while important, created barriers between them and the people they wanted to serve. Taking time to step out of the car and meet people directly had been a deliberate choice to break down those barriers and create genuine connections. As the evening drew to a close, Kate reflected on the incredible journey that had begun with her being frustrated about being late for work. That morning had not only given her a treasured memory, but it also reminded her of the importance of her work and inspired her to approach it with renewed passion and commitment. She had learned that leadership isn't about titles or positions, but about treating every person you meet as if they matter, because they do. Years later, Kate still kept the invitation from the palace reception framed in her office, alongside the newspaper clipping that showed her conversation with the royal visitor on that memorable morning. Whenever she faced particularly challenging days in her charity work, she would look at these reminders of a time when she witnessed authentic leadership in action. The memory continued to inspire her to treat every family she helped with the same dignity and respect she had experienced that day. Kate often told the story to new volunteers at her charity, using it to illustrate the difference that genuine human connection can make in people's lives. She would explain that whether you're a member of the royal family or a community volunteer, the principles are the same. listen with your heart. Treat every person as an individual worthy of respect, and never underestimate the power of taking time to show someone that their life and work matter. The morning that had begun with frustration and ended with transformation had taught Kate that sometimes the most meaningful moments in life come when we least expect them. Often when our carefully planned schedules are disrupted by something far more important than whatever we thought we needed to accomplish that day.